Comme c'est un atelier pour le cours d'anglais, tout est en anglais. J'espère que ça ne vous dérange pas. Everything will be in English from this point forward, but don't hesitate to ask me questions in French. I obviously speak it and understand it. So, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon session designed to provide you with some ideas to kickstart your year in the ELA classroom. This workshop is also an opportunity for you to share ideas, lessons, resources with your colleagues. And I know there might just be two of you here in the audience, but I say let's get started because I'm pretty sure we can still do all the things that we set out to do. And so, a little bit about me, not too much, because I could talk about myself and you don't need to hear about me too long. Although I'm now a designer of professional learning, what we would call a consultant with the Consortium, I was a classroom teacher for over 20 years. And I've had the pleasure of teaching English language arts to students of all ages, K right through 12, maybe. And I love language learning in general, both for myself and as a teacher. Even though I've got lots of experience, what I'm doing today is I'm counting on all of you to be the experts in the room with me. And I'm just here to facilitate the learning and the sharing. And it's what I generally do in any given workshop. And so let's recap a little bit of what we already know about the ELAL curriculum. And I'm assuming that you've seen it. Here is a view of the progression of the organizing ideas from kindergarten to grade 6. Now, I'm well aware that we're not teaching in grades kindergarten 1 and sometimes 2. So we really look at the progression from 3 to 6. What we notice in this visual is how phonological awareness, phonics, and fluency are gradually eliminated over time. Right? Starting in grade 3, we get rid of phonological awareness. Grade 4, phonics goes out the window, and fluency leaves us in grade 5. Okay? However, I want you to keep in mind a couple of very important things. Number one, our EAL students will continue to need support in these areas until they start to see some mastery. So, for example, if you've got a student who's new to your school, new to the country, for X, whatever reasons, and they're coming in grade 4, you'll probably have to go over phonological awareness and phonics with them. So don't forget about those EAL students. I'm sure you don't. Having a mix of students in our class can sometimes pose a challenge. So like I said earlier, before I started recording, my next workshop deals with differentiation. And so that's a great opportunity to start talking about EAL. And I'll also be looking at providing potentially a workshop that is really dedicated to EAL, the benchmarks, and embedding that in our planning and our practice. But the second thing I'd like you to notice is that since our students don't begin ELAL until grades 2 or 3, we also might need to go back into those curricula in order to support their learning in these areas. So sometimes we'll have to go as far back as kindergarten, grade 1, just to make sure that our students are on par with the rest of the students in the province. Not forgetting that our students have less time dedicated to ELAL. However, being in the milieu minoritaire, we know that our students are coming to us with plenty of English. Not always, but most of the time. And the other thing that we know is that there is a certain amount of transfer that's happening from their French class. Okay, I talked about that at the last workshop, and everybody here can have access to that recording and whatever we talked about in that last session. I think it was a pretty rich discussion. But moving on, looking again at the organizing ideas from the curriculum, right? We know that the structure of this new curriculum is such that it really allows for more clarity in terms of what we should be teaching and a lot less guesswork when it comes to the expectations for assessing our students. This visual, though, reminds us of the overlap that exists in any language program. So although there's structure and although there's clarity, there's overlap, right? So where you see text forms and structures, for example, we will see that in students' writing. We will see that in their comprehension. And so we're touching on two different pillars of reading, for example, in just text forms and structures. And the same works its way through. And so if we're dealing with conventions, we need to know what those conventions are when we're reading, but we also need to know what they are when we're writing. And so we went from just reading, writing, listening, speaking, sort of the four domains. We've really expanded that, but not forgetting all that overlap. All right. So this chart allows us to connect the pillars of reading to each organizing idea and to see where that overlap exists. This way, we can weave in concepts from different organizing ideas over the course of the year. That way, we can cover more ground, be more efficient. And when we think of this curriculum in this way, it does allow us to plan with a little bit more intention. All right. So like I said, reading, writing, speaking, and listening is something that we've looked at in all the years of teaching language. And just to further our reflection on how everything is interrelated in language, let's consider how reading, writing, listening, and speaking support one another over time. Of course, they play crucial roles in school. They're all interrelated. They all affect one another. So you can't get away from that. And when we think of our younger students, grades 2 and grade 3, when they're just starting out, our intention will probably be to prioritize more the listening and speaking, the oral language component. I'm going to back up just a second, just to point that out. Oral language, in this sense, is in itself an organizing idea. All right. So let's begin with the basics. Some of you may be more focused on oral language, like I just mentioned, depending on the grade level that you teach. However, it can't be overstated that talk is important at all levels. And these are some reasons why. So talk can reveal understanding and misunderstanding. What I like about talk as well, especially in the age of artificial intelligence, where some of our older students are perhaps using the technology as a tool or as an assistant, we want to make sure that the work they're writing, handing in, is theirs and that they truly understand what they're putting down on paper. So talk is a great way to do that. You interview your students, you have dialogue, you go back and forth. Talk increases a shared knowledge, right? So as the class discusses together their views on a particular novel or reading, that's what it's there for. It decreases reliance on the teacher as the only source of knowledge in the room. I can go check in with my buddy. Talk stimulates whole language development. It's the more we get them talking, the more they'll be using the conventions that we'll be teaching in mini lessons throughout the day. Talking about learning is the first step to writing about learning, right? So again, there's that connection between talk and writing. Talk enhances the development of social skills. Of course, that's how we interact. Talk is a form of communication. There are many forms of communication. However, this being one, we know that that interaction helps them in all aspects of their lives. And talk promotes deeper reasoning. We can think about thinking, and the more we do that out loud, the better it is for our metacognition, right? So I'll just make a mention right now that the slides from this presentation will be shared out to you. So I credit some people throughout. You'll have access to that. So anytime you have questions about what you're seeing here today or hearing here today, you'll be able to go back and reference what I've referenced. So along the same theme of talking, right, oral language, like I said, a lot of times, especially when they're just starting out, our priority will be oral language. But regardless, even we're talking in grades 4, 5, and 6, talking is important. So let's talk about talking circles or sharing circles. Now, there's a difference between the two, okay? And this is really a beautiful way to integrate the ELA curriculum into Indigenous ways of knowing and being. It's by talking, promoting talking, or sharing circles in your class. But just to be clear, sharing circles are the less formal practice based on the sacred traditions of talking circles. So in one, the more formal, we're inviting an elder to help facilitate the circle. It is a more formal process. And so you want to really put the accent on the less formal circle so that it can still be based on the sacred tradition of many Indigenous peoples that live and play and work on Turtle Island. But it's really there to communicate, to solve problems, to create community. It's such a beautiful way to start a day, to end a day. You could throw it in there. I've often believed that mindfulness practice is a great way to integrate a nice routine. A lot of teachers do it. I find it helps with certain behavioral issues we sometimes see, but this takes it even one step further. All right, this allows us to interact and create that community that we seek in our classroom. Equity. Each voice is heard, it's respected, and it's valued. You get to practice active listening skills. Now, that's something I would definitely have a mini lesson about in my classroom before just launching in. I would definitely have an entire lesson on what a talking circle is or a sharing circle. And I have a link, a resource that will help you do that. And it's even grade level associated. So talking circles can be used as a part of your classroom teaching to create a safe and non-judgmental place for your students to share their thoughts and ideas, to build the relationships, and explore perspectives and worldviews. These are some benefits of this practice, and you can find some guidance for using these in your teaching practice on the Empowering the Spirit website, and those are by grade level. Oops, I apologize. And so I really think that talking circles are one of those things that it doesn't matter what you're teaching. This is a great integration into the classroom. I will go directly to my planning template for this particular session, because here I've included several resources that deal just with talking circles. So in that respect, I'm going to go directly to the Empowering the Spirit website. I'm assuming everybody can still see what's going on my screen. So on this website, here we have it in English, but I will let you know that it also exists in French. So almost.
Sorry, I don't see your screen.
Oh, you don't see the screen?
Barbara. No.
Hang on. Thank you for letting me know. I'm just going to stop the share. And we'll see if we can see it now. Thank you for letting me know. Oh, I can see why. There you go. How's that?
Yeah, I can see it now. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So, like I said, this particular website is in English and in French. As you can see, the Français button is right up at the top. It's laid out more or less the same. There are tons of resources here, but when I refer specifically to talking circles, you'd want to go to the orange Shirt Day and Beyond teaching tools for the classroom tab. And like I said, tons of resources, a wonderful place if you're looking to integrate any of this in your practice. But the talking and sharing circles as a tool for learning includes K-3, 4-6, and 7-12 guides to help you install this, put this into practice in your classroom, rather. I'm just going to show you what the grades 4-6 poster looks like, and it's a poster, so it's printable. You can laminate it and you can put it up in your classroom. You can make a copy for each student to have. It's completely up to you. And so the way this works is what it includes, right? You want a blessing from an elder. Again, this is the more formal version. But if you don't want to do a formal version, you just don't do that first part. You don't have special prayers or blessings or sacred objects like a talking stick. You don't need to invite an elder. But what you can do is you can sit your students in a circle. And You choose a topic. Sometimes it's in relation to the dynamics of the classroom, a conflict that has been ongoing between groups of students in your class. And so the teacher decides on what the topic is. Students can definitely have input. That's how you create community. And you talk about feelings, and you make it very clear that your classroom environment is a safe and non-judgmental place, and everybody needs to respect that. So you have to go over all those concepts ahead of time. No comments, whether they're positive or negative. You share how you feel about the subject. And the nice thing here is that you can pass your turn to talk. In the more formal talking circles, everybody has to have a word to say, but in this case, you can pass. So I encourage you to give this particular activity a try. And I'm even going to go so far as to say this routine. Okay, that's what we're here to talk about today, are the routines. All right, so let me continue on with the presentation. I'll share my screen again. See if this works. Yeah, you should be able to see this. Okay. All right.
We are.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So that's talking or sharing circles. We're not quite done yet with talk. Right? Since we're focused on routines in the ELA classroom, here are some tips for including talk as part of your routine. And these tips are not just to help develop language, by the way, but also to help build relationships in your classroom. And often as an English teacher in a francophone school, you may be the specialist who only sees your group for like a short period of time per cycle. We want to be sure that we've given our students plenty of opportunities to be seen and heard. And we want them to transfer the language skills and apply them in other settings, right? So even though we've got them, I don't know, I'm going to guess 3 days out of a cycle of 6 days, maybe 40 to 60 minutes for a period. Right? It's not a lot of time, and you know you've got to get through curriculum and get work done. And there's a lot of pressure on teachers for things like that. But when we think about why we're teachers, we don't want to forget that we're preparing them for their lives, right? That's part of what we do. So allowing them to be able to transfer skills like talking, speaking, and listening actively. We want to spend enough time doing that. And as we know, that leads to better reading and better writing as we go on. Among the tips and techniques mentioned here, right? So first, we decide on the routine and how that's going to work. You're talking with your students. There are greetings that happen, right? You meet them at the door, you go back and forth. You can have a little routine when it comes to that. There's conflict resolution. Again, I'm going to refer back to talking or sharing circles. You can have a turn and talk after a lesson. There's one particular speaker that I love to go see. I love her, love her, love her. I'm sure you've heard Shelley Moore. If you haven't heard of her, she's somebody to go check out. And every time I've been in one of her sessions, she'll throw a concept out. She'll talk for a little while. And what I love is that she won't spend an inordinate amount of time talking about a subject or giving us a lesson. What she'll do is she'll break it up. Here's the concept. Now turn and talk to the person next to you. It really allows for that deeper reflection on the topic at hand. And so don't be shy to do that. Even if you're doing a mini lesson of 10 to 15 minutes, spend maybe a minute or two in that turn and talk. Okay? And centers. During centers, and I don't care what age your students are, centers are legitimate and they are beneficial, K to 12. So it's one of those things that I definitely advise. Here you can see, like I said, some tips and techniques, and among them is the first one, photo starts. So I've included an image on the screen that can be inspiration for your planning. Like this is just an image I had in my camera roll, and I particularly love it, and I'll tell you why. This is an image of my daughter taking a free throw shot, and she makes it, by the way. It's very, very exciting, but it's an exciting shot, right? it leads us to have a lot of feelings. And given that space, you can get your students talking and answering questions like who, what, when, where, and why. It's the very basic of any conversation. And if you were present, thinking along the lines of, if you were there when this photo was taken, how would you be feeling? What would you be smelling? What would you be tasting and hearing and seeing? So really incorporating the five senses into any conversation is number one, vocabulary building, and number two, another great way to incorporate Indigenous ways of knowing and being. That's just an Indigenous pedagogy. So that's photo starts. Coffee time conversation can look however you like. And part of the daily five, if you're aware of how the daily five works, usually we're focused more on reading and writing, but you can definitely include in there coffee time conversations and any kind of conversation. Having discussion prompts, and this is where artificial intelligence can really save you time in your planning of discussion prompts. You can take a theme that you're working on, you can have watched a film with your students and have those discussion prompts ready to go. Moved by music and lyrics, they can be perfect starters to conversations. Of course, there are capacity building routines that we usually see in the French class in FLPL. So that's great, but we might also want to integrate those routines into our ELA classroom. Again, some moments during your class these moments can be used to promote language learning. The beginning of the school year is meant for establishing routines. And those moments that you spend on these seemingly superfluous activities are really great opportunities to help organize your students and set expectations. If you're the English specialist, again, you're sometimes asked to follow the homeroom teacher's routines and expectations. However, I kind of advise against that. I sincerely think that you should set your own with each of your groups. Every kid is different. Every group of kids is going to be different, right? And if you happen to be the homeroom teacher, then these routines are probably already embedded into your class structure. Not forgetting that if you're the homeroom teacher, but also the English teacher, how can you alternate it, switch it up? Okay, so you've done it in French. You don't want to redo it in English. So maybe you've got conversation routines in French and asking for help routines or a writer's workshop in English. Whatever the case may be, you can definitely alternate it. Nothing says that you can't double up on it, but we know time is always of the essence. So in that case, where it's embedded in your already full day with the same students that you have, it's important to have a transition routine whereby your students realize that not only has there been a change in the period and the time, but also a change in language proficiency. These are simply moments that can be used to infuse language learning, right? Transitions can be really difficult, but spending a lot of time on it at the beginning of the year is particularly helpful. I will also say that just classroom material organization in general, right? How students have to hand in their work, what they should expect from you in terms of returning feedback, what you expect for attendance, how you want that reply to go, uh, classroom movement, what they're allowed to do, when you dismiss a class, is it the bell, is it you? And station rotation during centers and small group instruction, I would be very careful, especially with this one, but at any point along the way, to explicitly teach what your expectations are around any of these things. Questions or comments so far? Okay. So I've got a couple of visuals on this slide and the next, right? I've got literacy time guides for grades 1 to 3 and then from 4 to 6. I will say this, there's nothing specific that you see in these visuals. The sense that I want you to get is when you're thinking about your organizing ideas or big concepts that you'll be teaching, is to think of them in a relative way. So how much time should you necessarily spend on each and every one of these things in a given period, a given week, a given term, a given year? All right. So if you notice down on the bottom, the station rotation and small group instruction would probably take up a greater portion of time than most other things. And the reason for that is you've got to have time to differentiate. You've got to see everybody. You've got to assess. So you've got to listen. You've got to have conversations with students. You've got to look at their work. You've got to go over that with them. And as I mentioned in the last slide, station rotation is super helpful because you can have groups of students working on different things and autonomously, right? So that independent nature of work can really help them as well and help you with timing and planning. And as we move along, mini lessons are such a great way, I think, to teach explicitly any concept. The amount of time that you have in your classroom, you don't want to be talking at your students regularly, consistently the whole time. You want to be able to give them time to practice what they've learned, to talk it out, to reflect on it, and to do different things. Okay, so vocabulary, phonological awareness, shared reading, journaling, or that morning message, if you're the first period of the day, those would go in equal measure. And phonics, on a par really with how much time you would spend on a mini lesson, because it is one of the building blocks of reading and writing. All right, so these literacy time guides are really just to give you the idea of the relative time you should spend on different activities. And we need to keep in mind that although phonological awareness and phonics are not present in the later grades, as I'll show you right here, right? Although they're not there in 4, 5, and 6 curriculum, there's always a way to make room for them if needed. And your planning should be intentional. And by that, I mean, you've got to assess your students. You've got to get to know them, their abilities, the group dynamic, in order to really successfully plan for their learning and to have them realize success. So just popping back over here to the literacy time guides for grades 4, 5, and 6. In this case, again, it's pretty similar. You'll just notice that we have less timer clocks on for images. So station rotation and small group instruction is still going to take up more of the time. Independent reading, and that's where I would really go. In grades 4, 5, and 6, I would spend a little bit more time on independent reading. In fact, I would spend a little bit more time on journaling, morning message, right? That writing part, because we're not really doing too much of that in the earlier grades. More time on vocabulary, right? They're going to be working on that. Their fluency should be down. They should have their phonological awareness and their phonics down, but we know that we might have to add those components in here. Okay, but we're not discounting read alouds or mini lessons. Again, at any age, I find a mini lesson is much better than a full-on lesson, especially in the languages. Okay, now this is really where I'd like to spend quite a bit of time going over some of the resources that I have for you, some variations, get your input, your feedback, and then we'll move on to more planning. Yeah, more planning. So some sample schedules. I'm just going to stop my share here. And I'm going to show you what I've been able to come up with. Okay, here we go. Oops. All right. So here we have, like I said earlier, we talked about talking and sharing circles, but the sample schedules that I've laid out, and this is really inspired from other teachers, and it is not prescriptive by any stretch, but it can, give you some ideas. And so I said earlier on, I'm assuming you've got maybe 3 days and a cycle. So on your first day with your students, in grades 2 and 3, you might spend 10 minutes opening the class with a talking circle, right? It's a great way to greet your students. Maybe another 10 minutes on a word study lesson, right? And in that lesson time, you want to give them a little time to practice. It could just be like a daily 5-10 minutes. So you could spend a little bit more time or a little bit less time here. That's pretty flexible. You might want to introduce after that a reading mini lesson, right? Same concept here. It's a mini lesson, make room for your turn and talk, you make room for the independent portion. And then the bulk of the work, like I showed you in those little timepieces, would be regrouping your students, right? You have them in small group instruction or small group work, and then you alternate it, right? So for example, you might want your students to be rotating around independent reading, independent writing, and word work. And if that's the case, then whatever group A did on the first day, well, maybe that's what group B will do, and then group C. So it works like that. You just alternate through it and work through it. And then you might want to end your period with a read aloud or a shared reading, right? So day 2 looks similar, but slightly different, right? Where we're focused maybe more on reading in the first, we might want to throw in a little bit of practice with writing for our littles in grades 2 and 3, right? They should have transferred some language skills from their French class. And so, you want them to be able to dive into that a little bit. You might decide it's something else altogether. You might say, okay, I teach grade 2, but I don't even touch writing in grade 2. And that's okay, even though it's in the curriculum, you don't have the same amount of time as your colleagues who teach in English schools. Keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to cover the whole curriculum in grades 2 and 3 specifically in the course of the year. And there is nothing prescriptive from the Conseil scolaire, the 4 of them in this province, and that I know, that I'm aware of anyway. And given that that's the case, you need to determine what your essential elements that you'll teach will be. Once you've made that determination, and I do have supports for that as well, then you decide, okay, what do my routines look like? What can I include here? Okay. And the rest of the time, oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry. I'm with my grade partner, just so that you know, so we're actually 2 in our room, just so that you know. We had a question. Are we doing for the high frequency words? Are we doing the ones that the government of Alberta has set out for us on the website?
That's a really good question. The answer is no, you don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So which ones would we just do, like if we were doing the fries words or heart words, if
So where's your school?
we're in Edmonton, École
You're-
Notre Dame.
Okay. So, you probably know your clientele really well,
Mhm.
right? Your community, the culture of your community, the languages that are spoken in that community, and the experiences that your students have. So I'm gonna give you an example of a school I have in mind. There's a school out here in Calgary, whose population is very diverse, extremely diverse, with a lot of new arrivals. And when that happens, what I would consider high frequency words in that school would be entirely different from the school that's like 20 minutes away.
Okay.
So I would be inspired by lists that already exist, but I would also consider my students' experiences, right? So when we think that snow might be a high frequency word, right? Like something you hear all the time, it's not the case for all of your students,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So it's very subjective is
Okay.
where okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent question. It's not the first time I've heard it.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so your word study or anytime you're considering what you're planning for your students, what you're going to have them watch, what you're going to have them read, what you're going to have them listen to, you might have to, in some cases, really think about is there any pre-teaching I need to do here? Right, I know that at Franco Sud, they use ELAL to do reading assessments. Now, those reading assessments come with a pre-teaching aspect, right? There's like a little pre-presentation, because you want to make sure that when your students go sit down and read what it is they have to read and then answer their comprehension questions, that it makes sense to them in the context. They get the context, right? So I would, advise you to do the same with any of your planning. Be as intentional as possible with that in mind, right? Where your students are coming from. So grades 2 and 3, and it's, how many minutes did I calculate here? 30, 40, 50, up to 60 minutes here, right? And those are adjustable times. It's what you think. But those are great routines, right? And as soon as your students know that they can expect the same thing, more or less, every single class, it's reassuring, especially the ones who are more anxious, and anxiety is much more prevalent these days than I've ever seen it, and with good reason. So if we can take away a little bit of anxiousness from our kiddos, why not? I know personally, routines, they keep me sane, right? They help with my learning. So now I'm going to show you grades 4, 5, and 6, what that could possibly look like. And once I'm done with this, right, because these are things that I've sort of put together, I'm going to show you what's out there altogether, right? What else is out there in the world in English schools, right? Well, let's cover this. So in grades 4, 5, and 6, I think here I've calculated a little bit longer time, 10, 20, 30, about 60, so about 60 minutes, okay? So you might want to start with either a morning meeting or an independent reading with the teacher, right? This is a great time where, okay, you can set everybody up for independent reading, and then one by one, meet with your students. You've got 10 minutes, 10 minutes a class adds up over time, and you're able to really assess and hear and interact with your kids that way. You might also want to start the day with conversation skills. And if you alternate these routines, but keep them, right, like day 1, day 2, day 3, this is what we do, your students will come in, and that transition in and of itself will diminish, right? The time they need to get themselves ready will go down to next to nothing, because they know what to expect. They know if it's going to be the morning meeting, they don't need their pencils, their Chromebooks, they don't need anything. They just need to come and sit in the spot where they sit for the morning meeting. Or it's independent reading, I know I'm going to have to get out my book today, and which book to get out. It's conversation skills. We're all turning our chairs to face one another. We have a dedicated partner. However you work it, whatever routine you decide to put into place, that helps take away a lot of that pressure. Okay, and so what do we do with the next 10 minutes? You've got activities. Maybe it's on morphology and vocabulary, a mix of the two, one or the other. You might want to start a reader's notebook or a reader's block. Sorry, not readers, a writer's block. And I put poetry on day 3, but anything can fit here, really. If we're looking at text forms and structures as the organizing idea, you're going to have to make your way through several different text forms and structures, and you could just then insert whatever it is that you're covering for that term, for that week, for that month, or for that semester. Right in the middle there, I threw a mini lesson. Now, mini lessons often, and particularly with these grades, focus a lot around conventions and grammar. So why not? And then get them to practice. Get them to, you do the lesson in 10 minutes, you spend 5 minutes on independent practice. And then again, bulk of the time, you're going through station rotation or a whole class activity. So the nice thing about station rotations and whole class activities is you might like project-based learning. I really do. And this is a good time to have time every class to work on the thing that has a long deadline way ahead. But you want to break that up, right? Because that's the best way to do it. Oh, perfect opportunity here. And ending the day with either a read aloud or independent reading. Now, some people say that read alouds in the upper elementary grades, Do they like it? Do they not? In my experience, they love it all the way up to grade 12. I love it as an adult. Read alouds are phenomenal. Does that mean you're going to ask every student to read a little bit? Depends. I'd be careful, right? That may work for your group, that may not. It may just be the teacher reading aloud and then some reaction, right? It may be how you want to start as well, but I like it at the end. Doesn't mean that's where it belongs. So if you do a read aloud to begin, and then you make the rest of your routines follow in a sort of theme based on what you've read, that works as well. Okay, so now I'm going to take you to this particular resource. All right, I think you'll be able to see it without a problem. But just let me know if you don't see this. Okay, so I'm bringing you to APLC, the consortium. We have the consortium and we have le consortium. All right, we are the same, except that le consortium, everything is in French, and we are province-wide. The consortium is also province-wide. So everything here is going to be in English. And this particular resource, I love it. Right? Like I said, I work with consultants or designers of professional learning across the province, and they have put together this amazing presentation. Okay, so there's the YouTube video that you can watch, which I do suggest because they are funny and they are fantastic, but their slide deck. This is really what inspired a lot of my planning for this particular workshop. So you want to know how to effectively design your literacy instruction. You could follow this to a T if you're in an English school. So that's why I adapted it, because you are not in an English school. All right, I'm going to skip right to some of these very excellent ideas. And I want to show them to you because I think what's important here is that you can definitely be inspired by the ideas that have come out, right? So an example for grades 1 to 3, okay? Here, we're looking at a 5-day cycle, right? But look at the minutes dedicated, right? That is not your reality, right? So this is part of the reason that I wanted to create this workshop, is because this is not your reality, but you can definitely, I brought you here so you can be inspired by it. And there are links, right? So if you do want to start off or have some inspiration in terms of a phonics lesson or a phonics routine, phonological awareness is there as well. These are just some ideas, right? The guided reading and small group instruction. In my next workshop, I'm going to talk a lot more about small group instruction and how to differentiate effectively and considering the routines you might have established. Okay, so that was grades 1 to 3. Just going to go through these fairly quickly. Right, here's another one. These are all just examples, things that were thought up, things that were shared with my colleagues. And so here, grade 3, this was one of my favorite ones. And when I looked at it, I thought, oh, that could totally be adapted 100%, because I liked that idea of alternating small group work, right? And how you group your students is something I'm going to talk about next week. I think that's really important to figure out. And not everybody agrees on how to regroup your students for effective learning and planning. So you can start with an oral language talking circle, high frequency words routine. You can do flashcards. Like, there's so much you could do here. There might be a word study lesson, mini lesson in reading, writing, conventions, the shared reading and read alouds at the end with the small group work in the middle. There's even I like this too. Part of the routine or the setup has a little sort of flex period where you can either assess your students one-on-one or you can give them time to catch up. And now, if you're in a school where you have cycled days instead of Monday to Friday, you might find that, oh, I have my students for ELAL on a Friday last period. And we all know what Friday's last period can look like, or right before a long weekend, whatever the case may be, right before a vacation. Even though routines are essential and important, the flexibility that you can save you and your sanity, and also make the learning environment enjoyable for your students. So you might have more game-based activities in these moments. So think about that. Think about having your extras, your special days, your special routines, or just inserting pieces into your routines. Okay, so you'll notice here as well that some people commented where they might need to improve on these particular schedules and what people are wondering about them. The grades 4, 5, and 6, it's a little bit more intense, it's a little bit more mature. However, it's broken down in more or less the same way, right? And I was inspired by this particular schedule. And guided reading, that was a question that came up. So when do I insert my guided reading? Well, you can have a guided reading practice as part of your small group work, all right? You can have just straight vocabulary work. Again, this is for grades 4 to 6. This guided reading small group instruction can be how you end your time with your students, but it's not a particularly easy way to transition. So that would not be my advice in this particular case. But you have responsive read, write mini lessons. You've got what somebody called the morphology docket of the day, agendas, written response prompts, again, using AI to help you with prompting and creative ideas there. Using text, illustration, video, podcast, article, song, story. Oh my gosh, that's what I love about teaching language. The sources of inspiration are never ending. Okay. And the comments here are really important as well. Somebody says they love beginning the day with morphology. Honestly, morphology is very exciting. I love to start my day that way too. It's consistent in its planning. There's daily written response, and some people find that important, right? Every day we need to read, or every day we need to write. And if you're that teacher, you can build it into your routine. And here is yet another one, and this is for grade 3, but you can see the blocks are quite long. And even though there's math in there, well, what's integrated is a read aloud in math, or a mini lesson that, okay, it has to do with math, but they're also getting their language learning at the same time. So don't forget, this is the part that you can't do, right? So don't feel guilty about not covering absolutely everything. And then there are just some segments that talk about whole class and small class components. But I'd like to go back and take a look at, no, I think that would be it. Yeah. Go ahead, Jenny.
I was just wondering, for like when we're doing the read aloud, are we reading aloud for pleasure, or are we doing a read aloud novel study? Like, so I'm trying to understand, like, would I do my read aloud, and then the next day we would focus on those words and on the vocabulary? Like, do you understand what I'm
I
like?
do. And
Yeah, just
another,
trying to see how,
yeah.
like, would I stop that and just do a novel study for like 2-3 weeks and then resume that routine? Like, how would I incorporate that together?
Okay. So I think you're answering your own question, but I'm
Okay.
gonna lay it out the way I see it.
Okay.
So you do novel studies, right?
Mhm.
But your novel studies are not like, you don't back to back your novel studies,
Yeah.
correct? So some of those read alouds are going to be you're reading the novel that's
Mhm.
part of the theme. And so if you have that component already in your routine, that read aloud, at
Mhm.
sometimes it's going to be that novel. And at others, let's say, um, we're in the month of June, right? And it's Indigenous Peoples Month. That's your theme. So then you might have a bunch of picture books, regardless of the age of your students. And that's your read aloud,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So the answer is yes to both.
Okay. It's whatever kind of works for us in the classroom, and then
Exactly. And I was the kind of teacher now, I taught mostly in middle and high school when I taught ELA. And I love social activism, right?
Mhm.
That's my thing. And so every novel was about that, right? They might have had a choice as to what they could read, but it had to be like it was a limited choice, a directed choice. That's one thing. And that at that age, that's more doable. However, just the idea of a theme or a unit is really subjective, right? It's what you like,
Mhm.
right? It may be a part of the school year calendar as well, right? Black History Month. There again, are you incorporating that into your teaching? And if so, well, you'll have a theme to follow. But again, you might have your own themes in mind, and that'll go like that too.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, let's see where we're at in the presentation. That about covers sample schedules. All right, and I'll share the screen again. All right, so sample schedules, right? Yeah, so that particular workshop, that presentation, those slides that I just showed you, I'm going to loop those in. You'll have them linked in on the page that I'm going to send to you or in the email that I'll send to you so that you can peruse that yourself, right? You can be inspired by that. There's a lot more information when my colleagues talk as well. But here, you know, yeah, I think this would be a good time because then I'd like to go on to some planning if we can. But this for me, this little bit, I won't take too much time, and you know, be straight up. If you don't have anything you'd like to share today, that's fine. But I'm going to bring up the whiteboard, and I'll do that by stopping my screen share. But I'm going to pull up a whiteboard, and I'd like you to add your routines to the whiteboard. What routines do you have going on? Or what tips and techniques what ideas, what do you want to share with the rest of us here? Let us see where my whiteboard is. All right, so bear with me. I don't use the whiteboard very much. I did put one aside for this particular workshop, and I just have to start thinking in English as opposed to French because everything is French on my screen. And I'm going to open this up. Now, can you see the whiteboard?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Oh, I'm so excited. All right. So you should both have access to this. Let me know if you don't. You can add a text box. You can draw with your finger on your trackpad, whoever you want. But here, I'm just looking for your routines. What do you do? What do you want to share with your colleagues? Yeah, see, I'm the type of person I would use a text box because, yeah, or a pense bête, a sticky note. Perfect. That's what I use on my jam boards. But jam boards, as you might not know, are going the way of the dodo.
I'm sorry, Barbara, my grade partner and I were discussing, and so we missed what we have to do.
Oh,
Sorry, I apologize.
that's great. I'm glad you're discussing pretty much what I want you to do. What I want here is just give me some of your routines. What are some things that you do in your class? It could be routines, it could be activities, whatever you like. Nice. Yeah, you know, phonics for the longest time was absent from a lot of ELA curricula because the idea was that whole language would be so much more beneficial to students. And I have to say that, growing up when I was in school, in elementary school, I did a lot of phonics. And honestly, genius. I love words. And I think phonics and the work that I did with phonics is the reason. Writing stamina, especially for the younger kids. If you know your kids and they struggle with inference, yeah, you might want to work on that more than something else. Right? Again, it comes back to how much we know our kids. I'm going to give you another couple of minutes to work on that. I like that. Presenting about themselves, talking about themselves. I mean, if there's anything they know about themselves. Right? Definitely gives them a sense of proficiency, gives them a sense of self-confidence. And you want that, especially if, if we're talking about kids who are learning an additional language. And vocabulary, man, that's something you can work on every single day. Every single day. I'll give you another minute.
Barbara, I just had another question. What's this program? Or this, yeah,
This particular whiteboard,
yeah.
it's just Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so it's similar to the Jamboard like you were saying, but okay, so only for Zoom then. Got it.
that's it. It's integrated into Zoom, but I learned of a new one called Sandbox.
Okay.
Sandbox, you could do much more with Sandbox, I think, but I'm only starting to learn about it. And it is integrated into Padlet. So if you just search up
Oh, yeah.
Padlet, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Or Padlet. Okay. Thank you.
no worries. Yeah, and I love that metacognition too, right? Their relationship with languages. So interesting. I also give workshops on artificial intelligence. And so I'm gearing up for those workshops. Next month I begin and I go right through to the end of the year. And teaching them how to use it ethically and responsibly is my big goal this year. So if you're interested, take a look at those. They'll be on our website soon.
Barbara, are we able to have access to those resources that you have presented, the planning lessons and models?
Yep, everything. Yep.
And so where do we go to have access to that?
Well, the beautiful thing, so I'll tell you right as we're wrapping this little bit up, at the end of the session today, hang on, I'm just gonna take this right here. Okay. And I'm going to close the, hang on. That's the one thing I don't think I figured out was the tableau blanc. All right, I'm gonna close that. So at the end of this session, what I do is Zoom thinks about the recording and it pops out the recording for me. I send the recording off to our administrative assistant and she makes sure it looks really nice. We then put it on our YouTube channel, but I take the extra step to send it to you, whether you've been here or you're absent from the workshop. I'll send you the recording. I send you the slides from my presentation, and I'll also send you either in a separate document or within the body of the email this exactly. And let me show you what I will send you so you'll know what to look for. There we go. All right. So you see this right now, my presentation. Like I said, you'll have these slides. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, this is what I'll send you. So it started here, and I have all these sites. So you learn about what a talking circle is, why it's important. And these are the kinds of things you can share with your students. Also, just talking strategies from Literacy Today, super interesting. The 2 sample schedules. Okay, now I'm going to go through fairly quickly with you some planning templates, which may or may not be helpful to you. I don't have specific activities. I have a couple, and I'll show you that in the presentation. So you'll have the slides, you'll see those. There's a site called Reading Rockets, and if you haven't checked it out yet, it's definitely worth it. It does align very nicely with the Alberta curriculum, and so you'll see that link there. The presentation I showed you that my colleagues did, it's linked in here, okay? And that's not all. I know it looks a little bit wonky, but you'll see it much nicer than this. What a writing block might look like and the important points there, the structure of a mini lesson, right? So these all refer back to the consortium and whatever workshop was given, plus the resources that go with them, right? So I'll show you an example of what that means in a sec. The CPAR, which is the curriculum planning and assessment resource, is excellent. So we only have grades 1, 2, and 3 right now. We're working on grades 4, 5, and 6. Before I show you the structure, let's say, of a mini lesson, for example, I'll show you the grade 3 example of what a CPAR is. It can help you with your planning and it can help you with your assessment. All right, so it goes through all the organizing ideas, some important links. Here it says ARPDC. Again, we are now APLC. And then by organizing idea, right, same layout as the curriculum itself. However, right, organizing idea, guiding question, learning outcome, the understanding, they pop it out and put it right at the top. And then your knowledge and skills and procedures. We know them as CUSPs or CCHP in French. But along with that, so really in connection with that, are some key vocabulary and concepts, right? This is for you, the teacher. This is what your kids are going to have to know or do. But some strategies and examples of what you can use to teach that exact thing. This is beautiful. This, I love this, right? So you have access to this, okay? And again, that's grade 3, and it goes through grades, 1, 2, and 3, right? But it goes through all the organizing ideas. It's super, it's very well put together. The other thing I'm going to show you here, for example, the structure of a mini lesson. Pretty simple. It's one little document. That's the resource, right? These are the things you need to keep in mind when you're structuring a mini lesson. And next, what does a writing block look like? And it takes me right to another presentation that talks about the writing block. Right? And I've given a presentation on writing in the past in person for Franco Sud. That was well received, and we had a lot of really good feedback from the teachers, a lot of sharing. Anytime I give a workshop, we put it on our YouTube channel. And so you should be able to have access to all of the workshops that I've done. Maybe not external presenters, but definitely all the ones I've done. So your time in a writing block, what that might look like, the writing process in and of itself. And I'm going to go back to the site, the APLC site itself. And if you're looking at the new curriculum for ELAL, It's under curriculum resources. You can choose your subject area, and there are 112 just for ELAL, okay, including the benchmarks for EAL, the EAL toolkit, which I find very handy because it covers the foundational knowledge, some planning, some assessment, some resources, right? It's got 4 parts to it. Morphology, right? A read aloud, love that dog. There's tons of stuff on here, right? What a single point rubric can look like in a Div 1 writing class, and so on, exploring idioms. Like, look at that. That's a ton of stuff right there. So yeah, I share all of that with you. Now I'm going to go back, and we're looking at planning. Okay, so what I do have is I have year at a glance planning templates. I sat down with teachers for each of these levels, grades 1, 2, and 3. I think I might have done 4, 5, and 6 as well, but these are all already shared with you, or you have access to them. And so, for example, grade 4, what we did as a group was we separated the curriculum into 2 terms, right? You might have 3 terms. It does exist, the 3-term year at a glance, but in 2 terms, we highlight what has to be covered and evaluated by the end of the year. Or is it evaluated in term 1 or term 2? And so I think grades 4, 5, and 6 are almost entirely highlighted, but I'll give you the grade 2 example where we don't highlight everything to be evaluated. So there are some aspects in grade 2 that you're not going to see at all. Like, you might not evaluate poetry or assess poetry in any way, shape, or form in grade 2. You may just touch upon it. Here's another example. Writing or vocabulary development. You know, I might not spend a ton of time on that. It's not my priority. I have to get through the priorities in the curriculum. So that's what the year at a glance templates look like, and that's what they're for. The toolkit I just showed you on the website, so that's going to be linked in. There is the long range planning based on literacy routines, right? So today we've talked about nothing but routines. And so this is a template just for you. And it's just sort of structured in a way that you could make sense of it, right? It's not very long. It's only a few pages, and it helps you, right? And it's the small group stuff, the reading, the writing and conventions, oral language, right? Just a great template. And if you don't like that one, or if that one just doesn't cut it, there's also this long range planning template that you can make use of, and it's separated by organizing ideas, right? So you can make yourself a copy, fill in your year, and then on the bottom, all the tabs have to do with the organizing ideas, right? So how it's organized by focus area, but then, oh, I can plan every single week, all through the year, right to the end, right? What my date range might be. So is it week 1, or am I really just blocking a full 5 weeks here? What are the outcomes and understandings for that particular lesson or that particular grouping of planning? What am I doing for whole class instruction, small group instruction? What are the resources I need? What's the theme that I'm going for? What does my assessment look like here? Is it formal? Is it summative? And on and on. So that is a great example of a long range planning template. And apart from that, like I said, you're going to have all these other resources and some inspiration for some great routines for your classroom. I didn't leave too much time here for questions or comments or concerns, but we do have a few minutes, and I'm here to listen. I'm here to find out what else you might like to see, what I can answer, what I can clarify. Floor is yours.
Barbara,
Yeah.
do you have, so we don't use like the government testing,
The and
yeah, we,
Yeah.
would you suggest any, program or that we could use in the francophone schools to help us better know our students and where to meet them? like I'm following a few groups and I'm like there's the Lens, LENS, but
Mhm.
I was wondering if there was something that was more francophone friendly. Not that's not the right, but like I don't want to scare my English language learners
Yeah,
by giving them a test and they feel already overwhelmed by like
yeah,
we also had the STAR assessment with Renaissance.
yeah.
That one can be really intimidating for some of our
Okay.
students. And so I just want like I want to have a good je veux développer un bon profil d'élève
Oui,
et je veux être sûre que j'utilise les bonnes évaluations ou programmes pour bien cerner
mhm,
où ils sont rendus et où je dois les amener.
okay. Off the top of my head, I know I have a long list.
Oui.
Okay. And so, je peux t'envoyer la liste
OK.
d'évaluations que j'ai. Ça inclut STAR,
OK, oui.
ça inclut Lens, puis tout ça.
OK,
Puis parfois, ces tests-là sont un peu trop standardisés.
oui,
Euh, Ça mise beaucoup plus sur, tu sais, les élèves qui sont anglo-dominants.
oui, c'est ça.
Euh, alors, je dirais, je vais t'envoyer ce que j'ai.
OK,
OK? C'est
oui,
super intéressant pour moi. Ça veut dire que ça m'ajoute un autre atelier parce que
oui,
c'est
OK,
vrai, c'est une question, l'évaluation.
oui.
Euh, Ceci dit, je t'envoie ce que j'ai. Je vais réfléchir.
OK.
Mais si tu as des élèves EAL,
Mhm. Oui.
have you looked at the benchmarks, the new ones?
Je dirais que non.
Ah, okay. Hold on. I'm gonna.
Oh oui,
Yeah.
oui. Attends, je pense qu'on les a eu, on les a eu au milieu de l'année dernière, n'est-ce pas? C'est sorti?
Oui,
C'est
en effet. Oui, c'est ça.
c'est
Donc,
ça. OK.
dans ça, si
Bien.
tu as des élèves EAL, je te suggère de prendre les. Il y a deux types de tracking sheet qui existent dans le document, le grand document. OK?
OK, OK, so ça, je peux aller voir sur Alberta Ed, n'est-ce
Ouais.
pas?
Ben,
OK, OK, parce que moi, j'ai que ça, j'ai pas le tracking sheet.
okay. I'm gonna put one.
OK, OK,
Yeah, don't go anywhere. I'll show you exactly where to
OK.
find. Because I had this discussion with a conseillère pédagogique yesterday. So this is the Supporting English as an Additional Language Learners site from Alberta Ed. The
OK,
new benchmarks are here. Okay.
OK,
The whole
OK,
document contains tracking sheets.
OK.
So, but it also contains excellent examples of that help situate your
Yeah,
students
yeah, OK,
given a particular domain.
yeah,
And I find this so much more helpful than the last benchmarks that we had to
yeah,
use.
OK.
There are examples of writing, videos, programming instruction, assessment tools, and strategies.
Mhm.
Okay.
OK.
So,
Could you please send us the link of
yep,
this website in the conversation box eventually?
right now, hang on. I'm just going to backtrack so you have it right from the
Yeah,
home
yeah.
page.
So going back to, we always struggle as to, I know we have these benchmarks, but sometimes we struggle as to who is an English language learner when English is their first language. So English is their first language, but they're not at level in reading or writing. Is it a question of because they haven't been, ils ont pas été dans un cours d'anglais, ils
Mhm.
n'ont pas eu, on a toujours eu ce débat de est-ce qu'ils sont codés anglais langue seconde, mais c'est pas leur langue seconde, c'est leur langue première, hein. Mais au niveau phonétique, au niveau de l'écriture et la lecture, c'est vraiment, on dirait des anglais langue seconde.
Ouais.
Alors, des fois, c'est difficile de cerner
Mhm. Tout à fait.
avec nos élèves francophones, dans un contexte francophone.
Exogame, souvent, c'est.
Oui,
Oui.
oui,
Alors, je dirais dans ces cas-là que ça ne serait pas un élève EAL,
Non.
mais comme j'ai mentionné, puis c'est le cas dans nos écoles, que
Mhm.
commence pas l'apprentissage de la langue anglaise avant la 2e ou 3e année.
Mhm.
Ça veut dire qu'ils ont, tu sais, pas passé à travers plein d'habiletés.
Mhm.
Donc, on doit faire ce travail-là à partir de la 2e, 3e année.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's why we have to backtrack in the
Yeah.
curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would start with.
Yeah.
And if there's still struggle, I would find out if there's struggle in French as well.
To see if there's a learning
A
disability
learning
there.
disability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
you
think
can
we
do it
always,
together. Yeah.
yeah, we always at the beginning of the year, on l'attribue au fait qu'ils n'ont pas eu d'enseignement explicite de la langue, donc c'est tout à fait normal. Mais quand on arrive vers le milieu de l'année scolaire, c'est là où on se questionne si c'est un élève. Ouais. OK,
Ouais.
parfait, merci.
Ouais, ça me fait plaisir. Puis je me penche également sur les évaluations. Je vous envoie un courriel dans quelques minutes. J'inclus le site que je viens de faire dans le chat, c'est-à-dire pour les EAL benchmarks, puis tout le beau travail qui existe sur ce site-là.
OK,
C'est ça.
parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Et ça me fait plaisir.
Sur quel site, tu as dit, excuse-moi?
Oui.
Sur quel site tu as dit qu'il y a du beau travail? Sur le
Pour
dernier...
le site que je viens de mettre dans le chat pour EAL
Oh, ok,
benchmarks. Oui, c'est du
ok,
beau travail, là. Il y a
ok,
plein de
ouais,
ressources. Yeah.
fantastique. Merci
Yeah.
beaucoup, merci
Et
énormément.
ça me fait
Et
plaisir.
bonne fin de journée.
Et pareillement, puis on se voit peut-être la prochaine fois.